Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. If you get a cancer diagnosis, particularly when you're a younger cancer patient with a more rare tumor, I guess it doesn't even matter what type of cancer or what age. When you get that type of diagnosis, it feels like you've been kicked in the teeth. It's a bad day. And what you want to hear is hope. And you're looking for the opportunity to grow and see how you can change and be able to respond to that cancer and treat it, because it can feel hopeless. And we're living at a time where more and more treatments are available for cancer. As cancer is not just one disease, it's hundreds and hundreds of diseases, and they all require different types of therapy. This is an exciting discussion today because we're going to talk with Dr. Brandon Mancini, and he's going to teach us about Theranostics, a really important emerging technology that has a lot of hope for many different cancers because it's so site-directed and so specific and so targeted and not quite as toxic to patients. So I encourage you to listen keenly. This is a really important and exciting field, and I appreciate Dr. Mancini taking the time to share. So please enjoy the episode. I'm pleased to welcome to the podcast Dr. Brandon Mancini. I think you're going to enjoy this podcast today. Brandon is a person who, as a physician, has had a lot of experience. Most of the listeners on this podcast are physicians and can relate with his experience, but also has this opportunity to run a business and teach about a really powerful tool called Theranostics. So I'm excited both as a fellow physician and as a person who deals with solitary fibrous tumor. Most listeners to my podcast know that I get to deal with this rare type of cancer. And so I'm really excited when I find people who are at the cutting edge of research, trying to find ways to help people with not only my disease, but other diseases that are similar to that. So today I'm really excited to have you, Dr. Mancini. Would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, my name is Brandon Mancini. I'm a radiation oncologist here in Grand Rapids, Michigan at Banff Health, which stands for Bold Advanced Medical Future. And so Banff Health is one of the world's leading centers in Diagnostics or Theranostics, specializing in these targeted radiopharmaceutical therapies. As noted, radiation oncologist by background, been in practice for about a decade since graduating residency, and kind of have subspecialized in this unique subfield that is a combination of medical oncology, radiation oncology, and nuclear medicine, after spending a couple of months in Germany kind of as a primer, getting ready for our company to launch back in the summer of 2022. So incredibly excited to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, I realize that encapsulates 15 years of a really exciting, difficult, challenging career path to get to where you're at. So I appreciate you summarizing that. So just walk back. We'll talk a little bit about Theranostics, but I want to kind of go back to the beginning a little bit. What motivated you to become a radiation oncologist? And then specifically, you did this career turn where you spent some time in Germany trying to get a little bit tuned up on the Theranostics, just all that technology. What motivated you to become a radiation oncologist, I guess is your first question.
Yeah, so it definitely dates back all the way till high school, where you start kind of trying to figure out what the future might hold for you. And I always had an affinity for math and science and helping people and so forth. And my mom was a clinical trials research nurse in radiation oncology. And so there was her experience helping patients with cancer on the front lines with clinical trials. And then she was actually diagnosed with luckily stage 0 breast cancer, but had her own diagnosis and treatment journey just at age 42, where she had the things like surgery and radiation therapy and so forth. And so having that direct impact of my mom having the diagnosis of a cancer, having to go through procedures and so forth to make sure that she's okay long-term. And then her job on a daily basis, dedicating her time and career's work toward helping patients with cancer and advancing the science. It was just the perfect blend and motivation to hop right into that field out of the gates. Really, the first physician I ever shadowed was a radiation oncologist back in that late high school years. And I really just never looked back. It was the patient population I wanted to dedicate my life's work to, and really was just a perfect storm to be able to have that introduction really early on.
I appreciate you answering it. I think every person listening will say, hey, there's a core reason I became a physician, and there's something specific I wanted to accomplish. I reflect myself when I think back. I grew up in rural Idaho. So the doctors I knew were these broad spectrum rural family doctors that delivered the babies and took care of people in the hospital and saw people in the emergency room and did it all. And so
Wow.
I had just had that in my mind. That is what a doctor is. And
That's cool.
so went through medical school, much the same, never really changed course. I'm going to do that because I want to return back to the same, be that kind of doctor. It sounds like you did the same thing. And then you had this really powerful experience, kind of negative, of watching your mom go through that disease at a relatively young age. Powerful motivations. It's important to lay the groundwork of why we choose to do what we do, because medicine becomes hard, it becomes repetitive, and it's important to find a reason to stick with medicine. So I guess
Yeah.
that leads my next question, Brandon, is how did you stay with it? You did it for a decade, but instead of saying I'm burned out, you chose to do something a little bit different. And now you've been able to find something that's really specifically on the cutting edge. So what made that? What made you decide to make that little pivot, that change?
Yeah, so I absolutely was happy kind of as a traditional radiation oncologist. So when I first graduated residency, I joined a practice where I was one of two physicians in a nice department as a community affiliate practice of the University of Michigan here out in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and really was treating things very broadly in a good way with external beam radiation therapy and doing some procedures and so forth. Very happy in that position, but was then subsequently recruited away where I could have an opportunity to join a larger group with subspecialization actually in genitourinary and then gastrointestinal malignancies, which I had the interest in just being a part of even more and being able to be more hyper-focused on a couple of disease sites so that I could even get deeper into the very positive weeds of helping people to the utmost and getting to be a disease site expert and so forth. Kind of similar situation, very happy within that space. But the CEO of my current company, Banff Health, I had met him when I was in practice a couple of years prior, and we always had made contact and touch base a couple times a year. And really, it just happened that behind the scenes, Banff Health was being created, unbeknownst to me. And one day he asked if I wanted to go meet up and chat a little bit. And really, through that discussion, he reached out and really just said, "Hey, what do you think about being and serving as our medical director and first physician in this really unique budding field of theranostics, diagnostics?" And he said, "What do you think about going to Germany for a little bit and training
Mm.
up in it and so forth?" And really, I just left that meeting and did my own research at home and just took a couple days to let it sink in. But I thought to myself, this is literally the cutting edge of the budding of a new subspecialty of medicine. And I'm being offered this really amazing opportunity that would be a once in a lifetime shot, and really just made that decision within those couple of days and never looked back. But it's been pretty remarkable then to take that deep dive, to spend some time in Germany where they had been doing these sorts of treatments for about a decade plus prior to what the US has done over the last 3 or 4 years, and really just took it as an opportunity that came to myself, made a thoughtful decision, and really never looked back.
No, that's inspiring. And it is interesting how opportunities knock but once. And when they come, you have to say, I'll take it. And a career pivot. But like you said, what a cool opportunity to get involved in something that holds a lot of promise, a lot of hope. And then you become an expert in this one specialized little slice of medicine. And then hopefully leading forward with stuff that will really benefit the treatment of patients for hopefully for decades to come. So again, what a brave and cool thing to be able to say, sure, I'll take a couple of years and go to Germany.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. No.
See, maybe teach us just a little bit. Like I said, the podcast audience, most are doctors, but there are some folks who are also cancer patients who listen and say, I want to know more about what this Theranostics thing. And I don't know the correct pronunciation. Is it Theragnostics or Theranostics?
Yeah, it's actually both. And I think you have different kind of cohorts of people that like to pronounce it in certain ways, but either way, Theranostics or Theragnostics. And really, it's literally the combination of the terms therapy and diagnostics. And really, the premise is that most of us have heard or have even ordered things like CAT scans and MRIs and ultrasounds and even PET scans, where PET scans are a more common thing for patients that may have cancer. And traditionally, PET scans have been more or less, quote unquote, sugar-based PET scans, where it's a radio tracer, a 30 to 60 second injection that's organic chemistry made to go localize or accumulate in areas where there's increased metabolism. And that can happen in a lot of different cancers. It can also happen in infection and inflammation. And FDG PET scans, so these sugar-based PET scans, again, been around for a really long time. really was the only PET scan that was applied to the majority of cancers, whether it's lung cancer or lymphoma or breast cancer, et cetera. But what has been discovered and created over the last kind of decade or so is molecular targeted imaging. Instead of using a metabolic tracer, it's using a tracer that can stick onto a protein that's uniquely found on a tumor cell or in the tumor's microenvironment. So it's a direct labeling of a protein. And so now this PET scan is the molecular imaging or diagnostic, really to tell us whether this protein is present in this cancer or not. When they simultaneously created both the diagnostic radio tracer and the therapeutic radio tracer. And the way that I think of it is basically it's a little organic chemistry molecule. And when they make the diagnostic, the radioisotope that's hooked on to the tracer is a picture taking radioisotope. More or less, the chemistry can swap off the diagnostic and put a therapeutic radio tracer on it. And maybe that same 30 to 60-second injection, that medicine goes and connects at the tumor level with that protein on the tumor, and commonly is taken up into the cell itself, delivering focused radiation from the inside of the cell outward with this ultra precision, targeted, personalized cancer therapy when it's all said and done. And so that's the therapy. So the therapy and the diagnostic, both going after the exact same target, is your theranostic pair or theranostic pair. And again, this is something that actually was more or less discovered way back in 1941 with Dr. Saul Hertz, when people would take radioactive iodine pills, which they still do today, for thyroid disorders or thyroid cancers, but now translate all the way now to 2026. And there's been so much more advancement in the discovery of new novel targets, the ability to use chemistry to create these very unique therapeutic opportunities. And we've seen a lot of success in both prostate cancer and neuroendocrine tumors that have created this whole incredible interest in exponential growth within the theranostic space, which is just amazing and exciting.
That was a really detailed, wonderful answer. And I think people can answer, you can listen to that, whether you're a physician or not, and realize that this is a really specific site directed, targeted thing. And then when you can couple it, not just with something that is diagnostic, it's also therapeutic. One of the questions that I have thought, or that I've read about and I've talked to others about, is whether you can couple it with just site-directed radiation or radioactive particles, or does it also go along with other chemotherapeutic agents? We have a variety of different ways to attack the growing and dividing of inappropriate growing, dividing of cancer cells. Are there other things that are being attached to those site-directed proteins beyond just the radioisotopes?
Sure. Yeah. Most of these radioisotopes are really teeny tiny small molecules where it's injected and this teeny tiny molecule binds directly to that protein that we were talking about. There are opportunities within the space in lots of clinical trials, even looking at maybe you can attach the radioisotope to an antibody. And then when the antibody goes in and attaches to the tumor, now you're carrying along this radioactive compound that's going to cause obviously tumor or DNA level destruction. There's also absolutely overseas, more specifically, and then here in the United States on a handful of trials, combination therapy. So combining the radioisotope-based targeted medicine with either more classic chemotherapies that is less targeted, but may radiosensitize the cancer cells to the radioisotope and create more hopeful cancer-related damage, or even a form of sequencing of radioisotope and things like immunotherapy or other targeted agents that can, again, uniquely more or less compound itself or create a synergistic effect for potentially more impact in durable response and improvement in disease when it's all said and done. And I think a lot of that is going to be in the clinical trial space and in the overseas space of trying to understand safe combinations, because obviously more treatments combined together, it may lead to more tumor cell kill, but could potentially have side effects that are also enhanced. But there's a ton of investigation in making sure that these theranostic medicines are as best as they can be, and then in combination, potentially being able to enhance what we're used to seeing from a response perspective.
No, that's exciting. So maybe specifically for, I know there's some trials around FAP or fibroblast activation protein for, and that's one of the targeted cells. So right now there's a lot of interest in that. I know you're not a clinical researcher on that specific area for solitary fibrous tumor. But maybe just describe to us a little bit, because you're very good at describing these. What does that mean for people who say, okay, I've got a FAP directed therapy where they're taking a radioisotope and delivering it to cells? Describe that just a little bit. What does that mean?
Yeah, so FAP is absolutely, it's the number one, if not top three most exciting targets that has been recently discovered. And we have a couple of trials here at Banff Health, and then there are a number of trials as well as use of it overseas in different programs. But FAP is this fibroblast activation protein or peptide. And really, it's cancer-associated fibroblasts. So these are extra cells that more or less are in the tumor's microenvironment. So if a tumor is sitting in a space, there's a lot of what I call basically webbing around that tumor. And that webbing is composed of these cancer-associated fibroblasts. And these tend to have an overexpression of FAP. And so there's also tumors like solitary fibrous tumor and sarcomas that not only have FAP in that webbing around the individual tumor cells, but actually have it in their cell membranes as well. But FAP is incredibly exciting because of the fact that it's actually overexpressed in the tumor microenvironment, that webbing of a number of solid tumors. That includes things like breast cancers and pancreatic cancer and colon and rectal cancer, solitary fibrous tumor and sarcomas and so forth. And so it's more or less a pan cancer, or what we call the trials as basket trials, where it's tumor agnostic. It doesn't matter what the tumor is called or where it originates from, but it has an overexpression of FAP. And simultaneously, there are several compounds and trials out there where really smart scientists have figured out a way to label it with FAPI PET imaging, right? So doing this molecular imaging that can tell us if FAP is present and what concentration that would be present in, as well as, again, a handful of trials here in the United States, plus off-label use overseas of FAP-targeted radioligand therapy. And I think it's just incredibly exciting because it's a new discovery over the last several years that applies to a lot of tumor types with the same principles that Theranostics, Diagnostics has had over these last several years, but expanding the usefulness, the utility, and the hope for patients to have targeted options within those disease sites. And so, yeah, it's one of the most talked about targets, and there's a lot of promise within it. And really the race is on in a very positive way, meaning there's really smart scientists out there, and a really good medicine in the theranostic space means that it not only has a high expression in the tumor and or around the tumor, and it's not really expressed in the rest of our body, or it's minimally expressed, but the density of the FAP or the target is really high. And when they create the treatment, you want that treatment to come and stick there for a really long time. And so that's what is advanced more incredibly, is the ability scientifically and organic chemistry wise to create and understand and progress with creating these molecules that can stick in high concentration for a long time. And that's allowing more of that targeted radiation to impact those cancer cells. So a ton of really exciting positive momentum.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate the detailed explanation. Hey, and some people listening to this are going to say, I know about this. Why are we repeating it? But there's a lot of folks who are like, so maybe they're family doctors like me who say, I have patients who see all these different things and I'm not well read on this latest and greatest sort of thing. But a lot of patients listening will appreciate that definition. So I really appreciate you going through it. I want to hear a little bit about Banff specifically. You got this extra training, took this opportunity when it was presented to you to go into something that really is at the cutting edge of how we're treating. And there seems to be a ton of promise with this particular field. What are the areas that you're emphasizing in your research and your oversight?
Yeah, so our goal when we opened back in the summer of 22 was absolutely to offer the 2 FDA-approved treatments. So I alluded to it, but there's an FDA-approved treatment for patients with prostate cancer that has spread to different areas of their body, as well as a more rare tumor as well called neuroendocrine tumor, which commonly can arise from the gut and sometimes the pancreas or lung. Those were FDA approved when we opened back in the summer of 22. And so immediately our goal was to ensure that we built the most comprehensive quality program to assist in helping patients with those diagnoses as quickly as possible with the highest quality care as possible, making sure that access to these therapies was readily available, and we could do so at a high level with a high capacity. Very shortly after opening, our next goal was to then get as many clinical trials up and running to cover a wide variety of different cancers, to also make sure that people that may not have many options remaining or are seeking a more targeted, personalized, precision-based therapy have some ability to consider clinical trial participation for their unique diagnosis. And so currently, we have trials that cover approximately 15 different tumor types. And so that's incredible because it's the 2 FDA-approved treatments, and there's still a ton of work being done to even try to advance the effectiveness and safety in prostate cancer and neuroendocrine tumor, but also the ability to offer first in world, first in human type clinical trials at Banff Health because of the infrastructure, because of the technology, because of the experience our team has. That has been just a completely incredible opportunity. We were lucky enough in 2025 to serve patients from 26 different states in 2 different countries, which is really neat. And the reason for that is because the comprehensiveness, the ability to have trials up and running as quickly as possible, to do it in a quality manner, and to be a very reliable advanced diagnostic center to contribute to the growing subspecialty here. So it's been a wonderful journey so far.
I'm excited just listening to what you're saying because, like, I have a patient right now who just recently got diagnosed with one of those rare and neuroendocrine tumors. You don't find those very often, but as a
Yeah.
primary care doc, I see people with all sorts of things. And often I am the one to find whatever it is because they have some atypical finding. And this gentleman had a polyp in his duodenum on an upper endoscopy. I'm like, that looks
Oh,
funny. Biopsied it, and it had really high parathyroid level, and it turned
hmm.
out to be a neuroendocrine tumor. Just such a strange,
Wow.
rare finding. And but you think about folks like my patient and so many others who have something that can seem a little bit hopeless or a little bit frustrating, and then to say maybe we have something that's site directed and targeted, and that's exciting to me as a physician. And the nerdy science part of me just gets really excited about understanding how this stuff works. And then it's really relevant to me personally because I unfortunately have solitary fibrous tumor and have to take treatments that are not really fun to take. And so knowing that there's stuff out there is, again, super hopeful. And so I can share your enthusiasm. It's fun to, like you said, to be a part of something where it's first time in the world where anybody has had that kind of therapy. So
Oh, yeah.
reflecting with you, that's really exciting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And the beauty of any new budding subspecialty, because of that kind of success within that prostate cancer neuroendocrine space, that is what has gotten the whole scientific community so invested, right? And so now a lot of different pharmaceutical companies, cooperative groups, the race is on in a very positive way to find more targets, better targets, apply the same principles and do better than we even do now in that space, because it's such a sought after treatment, even by patients, because it's ultra targeted treatment. It's personalized to just their disease and the expression of these proteins on their tumor type. And people typically feel quite well when they receive these therapies. And so you can get an injection that's a targeted radiation medicine, and you can go play pickleball the next day and really not
Really?
feel different, or go golfing, or do this, that, or the other, right? So it's a very interesting treatment because it's incredibly directed, it's targeted, it's very aggressive treatment to the cancer's DNA, but our body typically tolerates it incredibly well. And that's the kind of evolution of cancer therapies right now, is getting closer and closer to targeted agents, specific to tumor agents, and those that might impact our body in totality a little bit less. And so things are advancing quickly, and it's just each and every day is very unique and special and very exciting within this space.
That is unique. If you could receive some sort of radiation therapy and then feel well enough to go do your normal activities the next day. I went through radiation for that,
Yeah.
and I felt fine for the first little bit, but by the end of that, I felt very bad. It just kind
Oh,
of saps all the energy. So having where it's really more site directed and targeted would be a tremendous advance. And then, if, like you say, it's the aggressive therapy toward the actual cancer cell, just but you just don't have to get the big systemic effects of it. So it's
right.
a really promising field. So
Absolutely.
next question is, where do you see this going? You're in the process of doing multiple clinical trials, and then you're offering some of these treatments for people from all across the United States anyway, like you said, over 20 states of where people have traveled in. Where do you see this going? And then I guess related to that, When cancer doctors or any physician comes across patients who need this type of therapy, where would you direct them to go? Because like you say, it's a new space. It's going lots of different directions. And I think clinicians, patients feel a little bit overwhelmed. Where do I go? It seems like it's new and up and coming.
Sure. Yeah, I think within the space itself, there's over 100 different trials that are active, and around 30 or 40% are still in that prostate cancer neuroendocrine space. And so the currently FDA approved molecules are both safe and effective, but there is still a lot to be achieved, meaning these treatments work in most people. They improve quality and quantity of life for most people, but they're still imperfect, and we can likely still do much, much better. So both of those medicines are incredible starting points for Theranostics to be a safe, new, budding subspecialty. Within the clinical trials that exist right now, it's a lot of different things. It's looking at dosing. Right now, it's fixed dosing at fixed intervals. So that means for prostate cancer, it's one treatment every 6 weeks for up to 6 times. For neuroendocrine tumor, it's one treatment every 8 weeks for 4 times. And basically, it's the same exact dose every single time, unless there's some lab abnormality that needs to be adjusted for. So the future will be utilizing that PET scan information a little bit more, maybe giving more dose for people that have more tumors and less dose for patients that has less tumors. It might mean instead of doing it every 6 weeks, we might do it every week for a couple of weeks and then take more longer breaks. So changing the intervals, changing the dosing. The 2 FDA approved products are called beta emitters, and I kind of think of it as gentle radiation. And so these alpha emitters are coming, and those are types of radioactive isotopes that really kind of pack a bigger punch, but actually over a much shorter radius. So these beta emitters, they pack a gentle punch over about a sub-millimeter for the vast majority, but some of that radiation goes about 1 to 2 millimeters. These alpha emitters come and pack a really strong punch over just a few cell widths. And for example, beta emitters, the current FDA treatments, you need thousands of molecules to latch on. So they're simultaneously shooting those little radiation rays together to create improvement. The alpha emitters, you might only need tens or dozens of little molecules to create the same sort of impact. So alpha, beta, different doses, different schedules. And then as we were talking about, different targets, absolutely, and potentially with combination. So there are over a dozen different targets that are currently being investigated. And most all of these targets are those basket trials that I alluded to. So it's find where target is overexpressed and apply that to every single tumor type that could benefit. It's no longer this person has breast cancer, so they get a treatment just for breast cancer. It's this person has an overexpression of FAP, so they get a FAP-targeted treatment. This person has an overexpression of the prostate protein, so they get a prostate-directed radioligand treatment. And so it's more of the targeted pan-cancer coverage of agents that are happening. So those are definitely some of the huge future directions that we're currently living in. And then combination therapies, as we alluded to, potentially allowing low-dose chemotherapy, immunotherapy to create even better outcomes or sensitize the cells to improve those outcomes. And then finally, it's actually moving those therapies very early into the disease status. So for example, with prostate cancer, it's currently FDA approved to give those therapies after patients have been on certain treatments for a certain period of time. It's very likely this year that the prostate cancer treatment is going to move into the upfront setting where the patient might present with cancer spots elsewhere in their body, but now they can get the prostate-directed radioligand at the very beginning of their treatment journey as opposed to later on. And it's actually very common that when you move therapies earlier, that they can be more effective and create more durable responses. And so just the movement of Diagnostics earlier in the treatment schedules for patients might also assist with better outcomes, more durable outcomes, better quality of life, and safer life when it's all said and done. As far as patients looking to know where these services are offered and who might have them, our website, banffhealth.com, is a great place to see currently active clinical trials that are open here. But for the prostate cancer drug specifically, there's actually almost 800 centers across the country that are open and available to consider offering that unique FDA-approved treatment. And so it is more common, right? We have 50 states and some other territories. So it is very likely that a center in someone's state or location would have access to at least that standard of care therapy. The website for the medication called Pluvicto. So I say it's like Pluto with a VIC in the middle, Pluvicto. They do have a location, a treatment center locator on that website. So you could put your address in and then you could be directed appropriately to the closest center for that. From a clinical trials perspective, sometimes that can be a little more challenging, but honestly, people are welcome to reach out to us anytime. And we not only go over what type of trials we have available at our center, but we may be able to provide additional information throughout the country where certain trials might be available as well. People can also go to clinicaltrials.gov and type in their unique diagnosis plus radiotherapy or Theranostics, and it should produce a decent list that can help direct with locations where these treatments and trials might be offered. But things are definitely evolving on the clinical trial front to get more information to more people in an easier manner. But at Banff Health, as we continue to expand across the country, one of our missions and goals is to help people, no matter we treat them or not. We want to get them to the resources that they need to find success and find treatments that can be helpful for them.
Wow, that's exciting. Never a good time to be a cancer patient. I'm not going to say it's not great to have that, but if you have to have it, this is an exciting time because there's so many things that are coming out. And like you said, it's not just things where we're blasting every cell of the body with the same thing. We are specifically able to target, and immunotherapy has been a really bright ray of hope in that area. And now we're doing Theranostics, where you're doing these site-directed carrier molecules that take those proteins right to the site. And it is an exciting time. So going forward, Banff Health is doing so many things specifically within your sphere of influence. The field, it sounds like it's going toward more and more site-directed, specific or targeted therapies, maybe even independent of specifically what type of cancer you have, because you're able to direct that to wherever that cell is, whatever types of cells are expressing those targets. Where do you think this will be like in the next, decade? Do you think we will leave some of the traditional chemotherapies behind and have most people doing site-directed therapy? Where do you see the field going over the next decade?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think definitely what we've witnessed in prostate cancer, I think, is going to be what happens across the board, which is when the medicine was first approved back in March of 22, it was approved for patients at that end line. They had to have chemotherapy prior. They had to have basically more or less all of their eligible therapies. And despite that, the Theranostics still showed improvement of quality of life and quantity of life. And so that allowed it to jump before chemotherapy in March of 2025. And as I alluded, it's very likely this year that it's going to be approved to go all the way up in the upfront setting. And so I think that's exactly what's going to happen in other sites. So there's only 2 FDA-approved treatments in Theranostics. So you're going to see more of those emerge in the next 10 years. It's going to be absolutely more than one, whether it's between 10 and 20 or just under 10. I think it's yet to be determined. But like I alluded to, there's over 100 clinical trials with very novel targets, with very promising targets and early phase data showing efficacy and safety. And so it's very likely we're going to have a number of new agents approved within that next decade. You're also going to see those agents, again, moving earlier before other non-specific systemic therapies. So I think in general, all of these targeted treatments, whether it's Theranostics, whether it's immunotherapy, whether it's other non-chemo targeted pills or infusions, those are going to be those upfront earlier treatments. And we'll see chemotherapy more in that back end of treatments, right? Chemotherapy does a great job. It's served a purpose. It's done a really good job for many decades, but there's always been that yearning for more precision with less side effects. And that's exactly what's going to happen over these next 10 years.
No, that's exciting. And I appreciate you and the work that you're doing being a part of that. Are there any other places, or again, you have the website, any other places you would direct people who are keenly interested in this to go where they could learn more about that or follow the work that you're doing?
Yeah, definitely banffhealth.com for any immediate needs. We have a newsletter you can subscribe to, both scientifically and just more big picture from a company perspective of things that are ongoing. You can find us on LinkedIn, on X, on Instagram and Facebook as well, where we post patient stories, we post ongoing initiatives and major advancements as a company and on the clinical trial front. And you can definitely follow myself on any social media or LinkedIn as well, just Brandon Mancini. and hopefully I would come up. There's not too many of us out there, but yeah, and happy to address any questions or concerns or support people as they need in this space if it ever is helpful.
Yeah, just reflecting back to the beginning of our conversation, you started off, like you mentioned, in high school, wanting to make this tremendous impact. You watched your mom go through something that was really challenging, and now you're doing it. I think 18-year-old you would be really proud of what you're doing. It's really exciting. So I just wanted to thank you for what you're doing and appreciate you taking the time to explore all that with us and teach us. Do you have any other final words or any other comments to leave with our audience?
No, I appreciate being here so much, and it's been an excellent conversation. And I think you've alluded to it a few times. Hope is the right word that I would use for each and every day, specifically in the cancer space, because 4 years ago, Banff Health didn't exist. The targeted radiopharmaceuticals for prostate cancer didn't exist in the United States. And we're always on the cutting edge of something more coming out. I get almost daily emails of new FDA-approved treatments for a whole wide variety of cancers. And so there's so much work being done behind the scenes at centers across the country and across the world. And so there's so much hope to be had because these treatments are getting better. People are living longer, more quality lives because of them. And just knowing that the work is ongoing and the mission never stops.
Yeah, really hopeful words. And I really appreciate you taking that. I feel more hopeful after this conversation. I'll be interested to follow your work, and I hope you keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.